Okay, thank you for joining us this afternoon for our final session in this strand. We're looking at the procurement of devices for a one-to-one device programme. So schools will often see buying IT equipment as a one-off investment. In reality, the speed at which devices and equipment become obsolete requires a plan for replacement and replenishment over time. Graham, who's going to be leading the session, will share strategies for creating a replenishment programme and the process of regular procurement, which are compliant with government guidelines. Graham has been with the Trust since January 2013. Prior to joining Cornerstone team, he spent 24 years with Devon County Council performing a number of roles. These include direct delivery of finance advice to schools for a number of years, finance manager for the reorganisation of Exeter schools from infant, junior, high systems to primary secondary, including the PFI system or scheme to rebuild all of the city's secondaries. Graham spent 3 years seconded to the DFE as regional manager for the South West and West Midlands for the Education Procurement Centre, a project aimed at driving efficiencies and cost savings in schools across the country. Just prior to joining TCAT, he managed procurement projects for the social care sector. Procurement continues to be a key feature in his current role, alongside responsibilities for finance, premises, admin, and HR. So I'm going to pass you over now to Graham, and if you've got any questions, you can post them in the Q&A at the side, and Graham will be able to answer those at the end. Okay, and I'll pass it over to Graham.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to start by apologising for my bio. I didn't realise it was so long and making me sound so old. But anyway, thanks for listening through that one. So, yeah, as Jim said, this is a session about procurement. Could have easily sat in the business and admin strand as well. But thank you to those that have joined this afternoon. Top right, I've just clicked from our EdTech website the details from a session that happened yesterday morning. Some of you may have been on that, I don't know, but if you are particularly interested in moving forward on a procurement of any kind, really, it may be worth you looking at the catch up on Trevor Finley's session from yesterday. So that was a more detailed look at operating leases and financing any type of lease package, although he did speak about IT quite a lot yesterday. So that's kind of like a sister presentation to what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes. So I just thought you may want to know that. So what I want to talk about this afternoon is just a tiny bit about what we do here at Cornerstone in Exeter, our kind of strategy, what we're looking to achieve in terms of devices on a one-to-one basis. I'll then move into some practical procurement, talking about how we finance our projects, how we procure them. I'll look at our invitation to tender with you, talking about evaluation, and then I'll close with some kind of lessons learned, really, some tips and advice. And please feel free to ask questions, as Jim mentioned. Jim, if they become relevant, do butt in and ask me as I go. Otherwise, we'll wait till the end. We'll see what happens. Okay.
No problem.
So in terms of Cornerstone, we're a small mat. We've got 3 primary schools in Devon. We've got a 4th opening in September, which will take us to about 1,500 pupils across the mat. And we, for quite a few number of years now, have been trying to implement, when we can afford it, of course, a one-to-one device strategy. So we've gone top down, and year 6 have had years and years now of one-to-one devices. And as you can imagine, across the years, those devices have got smaller and smarter. If I showed you a picture of our year 6 teaching area about 10 years ago, then you couldn't really see it for screens and monitors, but a bit different these days. And as the years progress, we've gone down through the years, year 5, 4, 3, and come September, we are introducing more of a one-to-one strategy in year 2 across our schools. And you'll see a few slides in a moment that are in relation to the recent procurement we've gone through for that purpose. So all those numbers in terms of year groups mean that we have one-to-one devices for up to 300 children in any one of our schools, depending on its age. We have a relatively new free school, which is only year 3 and below at the moment, for example. And one of the things that we have intentionally done is stagger the timeline, and by that I mean not going out to procure 300 devices in one go. We tend to roll it on a year by year basis. So year 6 and year 5 is one little procurement, year 4, year 3 is another one, and year 2 is a separate one. And I think doing it that way, you can then replenish on a more up-to-date basis, and you can access decent fit for purpose kit more immediately. In terms of investment, you have choices, don't you, when you procure IT? Do you buy or do you lease? Is the two main questions to ask yourself. And the minute you make that decision, you've got to realise that you're not really making a one-off decision, and particularly when you go down the leasing route, you are committed. Unless you just think, you know what, in 3 years we're going to ditch that. You are committed to a replenishment program every 3 years, or whatever period that you decide to go over. And by doing that, we feel that we can offer our children fit for purpose devices. The life of a computer is probably 4 or 5 years really, but in terms of keeping up to date with technology and what we can offer, we think fit for purpose is probably no more than 3 at this point in time. So that's why we take that decision. What we try and do is make our decisions curriculum driven. So for example, a lot of what the children get involved in really does need a fit for purpose modern device, rather than what I've called here domestic use, which is just more general use of IT, sort of emails and Word and Excel, PowerPoint, that sort of thing. Your decisions will be based on how you see what your children need. I put a slide point here about governor or trustee buy-in, and I think this is really important, because if you are significantly investing in something, you would of course go through the traditional routes in terms of who's got the power to say, yep, you can go ahead with that purchase. But as I said further up the slide there, this is an ongoing strategy. Once you start, then you're kind of locked in a lot of ways. It's like leasing a car, isn't it, at home? Once you've leased the first time, you're probably highly likely to continue that pattern and change your car every 3 years, and it's never quite belonging to you, is it? So it's very similar strategy there really, and in that way it will become high up on your budgeting priority list. And one of the first things you always look at, of course you will, is the cost of your staff, and this will go up that list and be very soon analysed after you've looked at the staff as more of a need than maybe what was previously just a want or a luxury. So that's a bit about what we do. In terms of the procurement, a lot of it will depend on your status. If you are a maintained school, there will obviously be the local authority rules and boundaries that you have to keep to. Sometimes they will only let you lease in very strict circumstances and for very certain items. You may not have much choice as to the arrangements that you can tap into. It's just something that's done for you, with you, rather than you having control. If you're an academy, then of course you've got more freedom to investigate the market, although you are of course under the regulations of the ESFA and their current financial handbook. Whatever type of school you are, you'll have your finance policy. I put that there because there are obviously thresholds to procurement. The more you spend, the tighter the processes become. And so, when you're looking at a big procurement, in our case, anything over £50,000 is a tender, and anything over, I think it's about £189,000 is qualified as a European Union procurement at the moment, which is another ball game altogether. Okay, so when financing a procurement, you have to make that decision, lease or purchase. I've repositioned that here as replenishment versus retention. It's definitely one of those items where time is a massive factor, and I think if you were looking to buy a suite of computers, you would then have to be making sure that you're setting money aside in your budget every year between their arrival and their useful life to be able to purchase your next lot, which I think is a consideration that in these times of tight budgets isn't always looked at potentially. And then of course, if you are actually buying your assets, then you have to, you know, recognise their depreciating value as well. So let's assume you're going to go for a lease. As schools, we can only go for what's called an operating lease, which I'll come back to in a moment. But don't think of leasing as just a quick call to a financier down the road or someone you've met on a previous conference or something. Look at it as a separate procurement almost. Get quotes. So what we always do is work out the rough value of what we think we want to buy, and then we go out to at least 3 or 4 leasing companies and say, how much will that cost us over the 3-year period? There are certain things you can choose to do. So if you have the cash flow to pay annually up front, you will get it slightly cheaper than, for example, paying quarterly up front. However, by doing that, everything tends to go out in September. And if you do have concerns about your cash flow or want to protect it somehow, I would probably recommend you look at the quarterly route, which gives you more peace of mind cash flow wise for possibly what is a bit more money. But from our point of view, it gives us dividends. Some leasing companies charge you an admin fee. It's only £200 or £300. Some don't. But make sure when you're wrapping your thoughts together at which is the correct lease route to go down, just check what they're trying to do in terms of admin fees. And quite often in the past, I've managed to, where quotes are pretty close together, I've managed to play one off against the other and get those fees wiped, which has helped. Okay, I'm being told we have a relevant question. Let's have a look. Thank you, Jim. Is there a particular range of companies who do leasing? Yes, there is. There's a company called EduLease. That company was represented by Trevor yesterday. There are other companies called, I think there's one called White Oak. If I were you and you're interested in this for the first time, the ISBL, which is the Institute for School Business Leaders, they have accredited partners, and that's probably a good route to go down. But if you just Googled operating leases for schools, which is what I do occasionally, you will find a few options there, and then you just need to make sure that the compliance is there, which we'll come back to later. Thank you, Jim. That was timely. Well done you. Back to the slide here. So satisfying requirements, that was what I was meaning there. We need to make sure that if you're told it's an operating lease, that it actually is an operating lease. And certainly as an academy, you will need your auditors or your accountants to sign the deal off. And by that, I mean, you'll get a proposal from the finance house. You need to send it to your accountant for them to do a few tests on. This is a couple of slides of an example that we had from our accountants on one of our recent purchases. So I'll let you read that, but basically it's about whether risks and rewards of ownership are transferred under the terms. And the idea here is that the full ownership and risk is not transferred to you, and the liabilities for the remaining parts of that, or those two factors, do not sit with you. And that's why there's a residual value left over in terms of the asset's value that can then be sold on to the next owner of that kit. So at the bottom, it just reiterates that finance leases are not allowed under the Academy's financial handbook. A finance lease is where basically you're paying for want of a better word, a loan over 3, 4, 5 years, and at the end of that period, you retain the assets. So you are retaining full ownership and risk under that type of arrangement. So when we sent the last deal to our accountants, this is the reply that we received, and this is their this is the wording. So she was looking for me at whether, it gets a bit technical at the bottom, but what the value of the assets was and the interest rates, and the substantially all of the fair value of the leased asset, and given the present value of the lease payments equating to 87%, blah blah blah, then we may consider that this does not represent substantially all. If so, I believe the lease can be classed as operating in nature. So I'm not going to go into that any more than just tell you that if you're an academy, if you want to go down an operating lease route and haven't done so in the past, you need to get it checked out by your auditors. In terms of the actual devices, once you've decided how many you want, you need to put that down in a document. So the question here is really, how specific can you be? We tend to, and I think it's good practice to, put down minimum requirements. Say we would like a processor that's this fast, memory that's this large, this flexible. We don't specifically say we want a device that's made by ABC and the device number is XYZ. Although, as you'll see in a minute, you can very often point people in the right direction. And the reason for this is they may be able to put an alternative suggestion to you, and you may think, actually, that device there would suit us. It's actually a bit cheaper. So you kind of leave your options open. One of the things we also think about is the deployment and your existing IT ecosystem, as in what will these devices have to fit into in terms of processes. You can get very excited about 125, 200 devices arriving by courier, and then all of a sudden you have to obviously get them going, get them deployed, get them working, get them linked to students' accounts, all of that. And we tend to put in our tenders that we would like the ability to ask the winning tenderer to do that for us. So we always ask for a price, because in actual fact, that may be better value than the time and effort it would take to do it yourself. And quite often that would be over particularly like a summer holiday period when not all of your staff are available to muck in. I'll come back to that summer holiday period at the end when I talk about sending the devices back, because that can be a bit of a headache too. As with all procurement, you need to make a price and quality decision. And by that I mean, when you're going out to tender, you will decide what percentage of the overall marks are price related, what marks are quality related. And it depends what you're buying. If there's something that's quite standard out there, you know what it does, and it's more about how much you're going to charge me, then you'd obviously weigh price highly. We'll come back to that factor in a minute when I talk you through our recent procurement. You also need to set up the evaluation criteria clearly, as in how you will market, and have a tool to help you do that. And once again, I tend to, at this point, try and get trustee involvement, particularly on the evaluation. And if it's a bigger project, it's always good to have one of the trustees sit on the evaluation panel with you. And so they can see, one, that it's a solid process, and two, you've got some higher up the pecking order tick boxes there as well. So in terms of the actual invitation to tender, or ITT as I may call it for the rest of the session, one of the things we do is when we're marking someone's responses, they can only get full marks if they are giving us more than we want, which sounds a bit cheeky. So if you look at my table here, any score of 80 to 90% recognises where someone's fully satisfying the requirement, is offering good confidence in or high confidence in their ability to deliver. And only when we think they're offering us innovation or added value do we get beyond the 90% mark, which is quite a good way of doing it, because it encourages people to go that extra mile and offer you something that maybe you didn't even realise you would benefit from. And that can be something extra that does cost, or in actual fact it could be something extra that's a freebie, but that will enable the tenderer to perhaps move up the scoring grid. I hope you can see some of these. They're a tiny bit small, but on the top there I've got the specification I mentioned earlier on. So this is our last procurement back in May, a couple of months ago. So we've just procured 250 devices to be allocated across our 4 schools in the year groups mentioned. Very important to be as specific as you can for the tenderer, particularly if you want those delivered into multiple locations. For example, here we make it clear we want them all with a keyboard style cover and a digital stylus. And then I always put in something about reserving the right to alter the number of any product if we think there's a possibility we may not be able to afford everything we want once we see the price. So that's that little note in italics there. Okay, so that's that bit there. Bottom right is the actual spec of a particular device that we do like, but it doesn't actually say what it is. I have a question. Do the companies give any hardware such as charging trolleys, free cases? Do they advise us? Okay, so possibly they do sometimes, but generally you are buying those on top. And that's a point I've got further down the slide. So you do need to make sure that you know how you're going to keep these devices safe, as in walking around the school with a child. How are you going to keep them charged? Are you going to have spaghetti junction of wires going across the desks, or are you going to purchase a charging trolley that sits in the corridor and charges the devices back up overnight? All extra expense. If that's the case, you could weave the provision of charging trolleys into a tender such as this, which we've done before. So can we have the devices? Can we have covers? Can we have pens? Can we have charging trolleys? So it all adds up. And I suppose on that basis, then you are spreading the cost of those charging trolleys across a 3-year period too. So then we get into the quality questions here. These are the questions that I've recently asked our set of bidders for the devices we've just looked at the spec for. So what I tend to do is tease out how they think they are meeting our specification. Please describe why the device or devices you're putting forward answers our question in terms of we want this minimum spec, please. An important element for us as well is the warranty that comes with this. What I would say is investigate what type of warranty you think you benefit from, because there are basic warranties out there, but then there are also more detailed warranties. Sometimes they are called business warranties, and they tend to be more 3-day return, get a new device back to you even before you've sent the other one back sometimes, so that child or that member of staff isn't without a device. So there's a question now about maintaining technical support, which includes warranties there as well. We feel it important, particularly when we're working with an organisation or potentially working with them that we haven't worked with before, to find out about their working relationships with schools, which I suppose is a bit of a null question when someone comes back for a second bite at the business, maybe the next procurement down, because you then know the answer to that question. And quite often we ask like a partnership building question. How they think they can work with us over and above just simply delivering 20 boxes of kit to us on a Friday afternoon. Our questions then go on to probe why they think the device they're putting forward is specific to a school environment. Maybe tease out of there whether they think it's robust enough for a year 2 child to use without it breaking it every time they lift the screen up or something. How they're going to keep to the requirements in terms of the timeline. I mean, that's a big one really, because if you are hoping for everything to be done over a summer holiday period, you need to make sure that they can deliver what they say they can deliver. And particularly this year, we've had issues with delays in the supply chain, with the COVID stuff going on, particularly when devices are coming from outside of the country. So, be aware of that. And then there's the question at the bottom there. I said, we asked them about deploying all the devices for us to, offering us a value service there that we think will be better than our own staff muddling through. However, do the maths. This is just a representation of the questions I've just shown you. And what you've got to bear in mind is you've got to give each question a weighting. You've got to split them down into categories. So on this procurement, we valued price at 75% of our overall marks, and obviously quality 25%. The reason for that is we thought from the specification we know probably what device every tenderer would put forward, so it's more important for us to recognise the price. What that does mean though, if you look at question AC1 at the top, which is, if you remember, how are you going to deliver to our spec? Once you work out the 100 marks for 30% of the quality marks for 25% of the overall marks, that answer is only worth 7.5% of their total score. And then if you come down, I mentioned the question about, have you worked with schools before? All well and good, but in this case, it's 0.5%. You could argue that's hardly worth it. So every time you procure something, you've got to try and think what's important to you as a factor, and maybe start with something like this table and work back up to get to your 25-75% split and see if you think it works. All right, so I'm just trying to show you there how it all breaks down, because you can think, oh, someone's got a fantastic answer to their after sales warranty question. That's brilliant. And then it's going to get them, no more than 1.5 marks more than the other tenderer who's given you an absolutely shocking answer. So just do the maths, as I say. That's a little tip there for you. When you come to the end of the process, you've got all your bids in. on the left hand side you've got what we call the pricing schedule, which is basically them, as you'd imagine, saying how much is it going to cost for 250 devices. You've got the real replies here from 3 bidders that we had, and you can see the variances. So the top line where it says 250 devices, there's not a huge amount of play. 102, 105, 99. A lot of this depends on their supply chain, whether they're an accredited partner of a certain provider of the particular kit you're looking at. The stylus, that's the digital pen. I think 2 companies here you can see were very similar. One, I think, misread what we wanted and actually gave us a price for adult pens rather than child-sized pens, and as you can see, they're as good as double the price. And the warranty, bidder number 1 gave us a very over-the-top warranty, whereas the others were pretty much standard, but that was the business warranty that we wanted. Okay, another question, Jim?
Oh, so we got someone asking about which devices did we buy?
Is it an insurance question, Jim, or was it the previous one?
This is on which devices have we bought.
Okay, in this particular case, you may not be surprised to know we ended up with Microsoft Surface Go 2s, which are the latest edition of the smaller version of the Surface, which, to be honest, are perfectly adequate for children. You don't need the full-size device, but you get most of the functionality there while saving £300–400 per device. So not cheap devices, but we've taken an early investment sort of strategic approach to the type of devices we want, and that's what came out top this time. There is a question about insurance, which I'll come back to in a moment, if that's okay, because I do cover that a tiny bit. So in terms of the price, what we do here is the person or the bidder who is cheapest gets 4 marks. So bidder number 3, 136,000, got 100 marks. The other 2 marks are relative to how close they are to that first price. Okay, so it's just a pure relative mark. So 100 for the top, or the lowest price, top bidder, 95 and 85 in this case. So moving on, the top right is an extract from my very exciting spreadsheet, which helps us evaluate tender responses. In this particular case, we had, I've changed the names, but we had Smith, Jones and Brown evaluating the questions and giving them their thoughts. You can approach this in 2 ways, really. You can have a group of people working together as a team and having like a team evaluation and coming together with a consensus score. In this case, I got these people to separately mark, just because I think probably that's a better way of doing it. So you can see that there are slightly different marks, although they are pretty close to each other. And then this particular spreadsheet gives you an average marking and does the weighting that I spoke about and gives you the overall score. So this bidder 3 in yellow at the bottom right scored 86 out of 100 in terms of their quality marks. You can then follow that through to the bottom left little summary. So bidder, the 3rd column right in the middle there, 86.13. That 86 gets multiplied by 25% to give you 21.53 marks. That gets added to the price mark above a 75, which was the top mark of 100, multiplied by 75%. So they come out with an overall score of 96.53. So you can see in this particular instance, the person with the highest or the lowest price won the deal, at the very bottom right there. However, bidder 2 did come out slightly, and I mean slightly better on quality overall. But as I mentioned, in this particular instance, this procurement price was all important to us. And so bidder 3 was the eventual company that we proceeded to contract award with. So learning from our experience, there's something called deal registration, which is something you need to be aware of, particularly if, like ourselves, you end up going down Microsoft routes. Other routes are available, of course. And that is basically where it's about level playing fields or not. And you've got to watch out for certain organisations giving advantages to a handful of potential suppliers. And by that, I mean they will in advance go to Microsoft and say, I think I've got a school wanting 250 devices, can I register for that deal? And that's happened to me in the past 3 years ahead of the deal. And by that, I mean the company that won the tender 3 years ago are already thinking, hang on a minute, in 3 years, they're going to want some more. Let me second guess what they're going to want. Off they go and register and get a couple of % off the price from the main wholesaler. So you need to watch out for that. Otherwise, it's not really a level playing field. But it has got a bit better in our experience, and we quite often do some advanced warning with the right people at the right company and say, this is coming, can you please open it up a bit to these particular companies who we're inviting to tender. But just watch out for that bit. Another thing to watch out for is the slides I had earlier on about the auditor sign off. Make sure you allow enough time for that to happen. They're not always able to turn it around really quickly. It takes someone a few hours to look at. Maybe if it's in a time of end of year processes, they're very busy. So make sure that is factored into your timescales. Accredited providers. This was going back to the first slide. I mentioned the ISBL at that point. If you're looking for a lease deal, look on their website and see who they're partnering with. Don't just go down that route. Look at others as well, which we always do. It may turn out a surprising way for you. And then another thing, which is we've had years and years of criticism of I think the classic one is photocopiers and deals that schools have been stung by for photocopiers, and that's all about making sure that you decide when you're coming to the end of your 3rd year what you're going to do, and in good time give adequate notice to them to say, do you know what, I am sending them back. Because if you don't, you will automatically roll over into a secondary period with some suppliers, which is something you don't want to happen. Some also offer what I've called a 4th year deal here, and for a factor of about 60% of what you've been paying per year for the previous 3, you can convert the lease into something that makes the kit your own. However, again, I would need to run that past the accountants before you even consider that. However, for a one-to-one device program for IT, I would thoroughly just recommend stick to the 3, roll it over every time and refresh your stock. And then, like I said, deployment, we've learned, we've tried in the past to do it ourselves. And at the time of year we were trying to do it, it just wasn't economical. And so we often pay a little extra for the deployment. But we have in the past also as well had that thrown in by the bidder and said, you know what, if we get the deal, we'll do that for you for free. And obviously that is something that's really welcome. When it comes to returning your device, again, a bit like giving notice on the deal itself, you need to bear in mind how long you've got to take these out of deployment in the classroom, wipe them, all of the GDPR and data protection stuff, get them clean, make sure they're not damaged, and get them off and back to the depot where we had to send them to Milton Keynes, I think it was, at our own cost. And we hired a courier to take them up, made sure we had adequate insurance. If you imagine the value of all of those bits of kit in the back of a van that unfortunately so had a crash on the motorway or something, you've got to bear all of that sort of thing in mind in terms of the insurance. We tend to take photographs of devices when we send them back, so that if we have any questions from the person that takes them back in, we can say, hang on, I disagree, or yes, actually you're right, there was a slight crack in the top of the screen, because they're going to charge you for the cost of any unnecessary wear and tear. We spoke about insurance briefly earlier on. We as an academy are with the DFE RPA scheme, which is a very comprehensive scheme. We're very happy with it. But what you've got to watch out for in this particular case is every time a child drops a device, the excess is £250. So I'm sure you can get other insurance deals outside of the RPA where that excess is different. However, we value the almost blanket cover we get as a benefit. An example at the moment, we have a lot of kit at home with children, and we have had parents sign them out with an agreement that should little Johnny drop it on the kitchen tiles, that they will cover the excess. It seems a bit mean, but you know, it's a lot of money, isn't it? So be aware of insurance. I'm not quite sure what the current arrangements would be if you're a maintained school, but you know, speak to your finance link. That I'm sure they can, you know, dig into the insurance situation for you. And then make sure your asset register is up to date. Even though they're never going to be yours, you need to know where they are. We find that as a device is maybe dropped, maybe we have probably over a 3-year period, 250 devices, I'd expect probably 15, 20 to have some kind of issue. Whether they're a warranty issue or an insurance replacement, make sure you track adequately that device 123 was replaced by device 456, because when you go to send them back, they will be looking for device 123 still, as per the packing note that you received 3 years prior. So make sure you can say where each device is. Don't underestimate the cost, the time and the headache that returning the devices can be. Okay, I'll pause there to look at any questions you may have. Let's have a look. So, do you benefit from being a Microsoft partner? Not in this particular case. We do have benefits outside of the procurement process. We don't get any preferential treatment in terms of pricing. It's very important that there's a level playing field there. So the short answer is, in this particular procurement case, no. Can the spreadsheet be accessed as a template? Can it be used to Yes, it can. If you would like to drop me an email, if you're interested, I can anonymize it a bit and send you a version that you're very welcome to play with. Do you ask parents to take out insurance? I think we mentioned to them that they may want to check what their home insurance covers, but we didn't specifically offer an insurance, for example, but we did alert them to it being a possibility. And I think there's one more here. What do you see as the greatest risk to continuing with a one-to-one device program over a number of years? Well, I think the greatest risk is probably the risk of everything else going wrong. So I mean sort of budgets, where they're going, staffing costs increasing, and maybe the squeeze on this you know, high priority IT spend being tighter. And at some point we may have to look at, you know, trimming it back, but it's going to be very difficult, I'll be honest with you, for us to take a step back from that strategy once we start. You know, and you know, I think we're on a journey now that we would strive to maintain, you know, the reach down through the classes, down through the year groups. I can't see us going below year 2, got to be honest, because I think the benefits lower than that in terms of one-to-one wouldn't be so stark in terms of, you know, against the cost. So I think year 2 is probably where we're going to pause, and reception in year 1 will continue to have probably 10 or 12 devices per 30 children. So yeah, okay. I hope that was informative. Sorry if it's a bit waffly, but I just wanted to give you like an alternative approach to, or alternative story to the presentation yesterday about the operating leases. You know, from our point of view, I'm not saying we do everything exactly how would be recommended, but it works for us. It's compliant. If you've got any questions, you know, please do get in touch with me, graham.newbury, Newberry @tcat.education, and I'll be more than willing to get in touch and talk further. But if there's any, is that one more question, or is that it now?
I've got one just come in, but they've replied privately, so I can't publish it. It's just asking about licenses as well.
Oh, okay. Where's that one? Sorry, Jim.
It's actually in the new one, but they've tagged it under, do you benefit from a MS partner? Okay.
Licenses, no, same position. We're in the same position as any school down the road. There's no real benefit in terms of our partnership there, but there you go. We have other benefits that we really value from being a partner. So I hope that's okay. I'll pause there. Thank you for joining the session. I hope it wasn't too boring. Procurement is a bit of a dry subject sometimes, but there you go. I love it.
Great. Somebody has to there. Yeah. I have put Graham's email also in the chat at the side as well, to a few of you who've asked directly. So if you need a template or any further advice, do feel free to email into Graham. Okay, thank you, Graham, and thank you for everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
That's great. Thank you.